Hello, hello, City of Lincoln, Lancaster County. How's everybody doing? Welcome to Elevate Your Impact. This is the fourth installment of Elevate Your Impact, and we're very grateful to have you here today. I'll go ahead and get our presentation on the screen here, and let me make that big so everyone can follow along. Okay, so in the chat, let me know if you have any issue seeing the screen or if you can't hear me. Hopefully you can hear me. But welcome to today's session. Thanks for being here. And this is a virtual session and we value your engagement. So strongly encourage you and invite you to utilize the chat function. This might be a good moment to make sure that you have access to your chat function on Teams. If there's any issue with that, sometimes logging out and logging back in or to the session can be helpful. But hopefully you have access to that chat function. Also, we invite you to have a pen and a paper there handy with you for some note taking, but also one of our activities will involve some written responses. So whether that's an actual pen and paper, or maybe it's a note-taking Word document on your computer, I invite you all to get that ready, have it on standby, because we will leverage that here in a little bit once we dive into the session. So I know a couple folks are still getting logged on, so we'll give them a quick moment to get logged on. In the meantime, for everybody who's here today, if you can do me a favor and under the point number 2, share in the chat, what are 1 or 2 communication lessons that you learned early in your working career, maybe at your first job, first couple jobs? What kind of communication lessons did you learn? Did you work maybe in a high school job? Maybe you worked at a restaurant. Maybe you worked on the family farm when you were young and growing up. Maybe it was a first job in an office setting. But what are some of those early communication lessons that you picked up? Throw that in the chat and we'll get a little bit of conversation going here. And welcome to those who are logging in. Hopefully you can see the screen and you can hear my voice. On the screen are a couple directions there to help you prepare for today's session. And again, we invite you to have a pen and paper handy or another note-taking method for today's session. There will be an activity that will invite you to write out or type out some of your thoughts and reflections during that activity. So the question to get us going again, and some of you are already starting to respond to that, the 1 to 2 communication lessons that you learned early in your work career. Maybe it was your first job as maybe a high school student or otherwise growing up.
I'm seeing some really good lessons in here, RJ.
Excellent.
A lot of good comments. Yeah. Body language, active listening.
Wonderful. Yeah, the active listening, that's a big one. We'll definitely dive into that one. Body language and the things that we communicate, even if we're not necessarily saying a word. So with that said, I see folks are getting situated. So let's go ahead and get started here. All right, I'll get my cursor and so this is Elevate Your Impact. This is the 4th quarterly installment of this Lunch and Learn series. And just an FYI, if you missed any of the previous sessions, you can access them on the intranet page through the Human Resources page on the intranet, and then under the Learning tab, you'll be able to access some of the previous recordings. And hopefully everybody also received the workbook handout that was emailed this morning. If you didn't, that's okay. We can put that in the chat for you as well. But that will have some helpful information that we'll reference throughout the course of this hour, and then some takeaways that hopefully you can consider practicing and maybe even incorporating into your respective workplace. Now, for today's session, we'll start with introductions. My name is RJ Vega, and I am the Culture and Organizational Development Manager here at Human Resources, and we serve both the City of Lincoln and Lancaster County. And navigating the technology and also co-presenting will be Christy Hernandez. She is the division leader here for the Learning and Organizational Development team here at Human Resources. We're excited for today's topic because, as we all know, communication is vital to so many aspects of the work we do here throughout our respective departments, our respective agencies, and then our service and function that we provide to the greater community. All right, so we have a jam-packed agenda. And again, if there's any questions or anything comes up, feel free to utilize the chat function. But today we're going to talk about the what and the why behind effective communication. So we'll dive deeper into that. We'll do a little bit of an exploration and internal assessment of, for those of us who are here today, what do we already kind of know about effective communication, and a couple of little surprises along the way. So last quarter, Christy introduced some different communication styles. And today we're going to build upon that. And for those of you who may have missed last quarter's session, that's okay. Christy will bring everybody up to speed, but we'll then dive into certain adjustments and ways to navigate the different communication preferences and styles here in the workplace. And then we'll round out the hour just talking about some different inclusive communication techniques, things we can do to hopefully within our meeting spaces, our one-on-one conversations, some different tactics we can do just to try to strengthen what it is to communicate effectively and inclusively with our teammates. So let's get started here. Let's dive in. I want you all in the chat to respond to this thought. What does it mean to you to communicate effectively? And we'll keep an eye on the time here. We'll give you some time, but go ahead and in the chat, throw out a couple of responses here of what does it mean to you to effectively communicate? All right, I see some answers starting to come in. Ooh, the awareness of yourself and others. Reading the room. I love that, Monica. Ensuring they understand what it is I am communicating. That's right. Excellent. Understanding the message. It's direct. Both parties walk away knowing what next steps are. That's important, Lace. Appreciate that. Articulate your thoughts in a respectful and professional way. Wonderful. Yes, yes to all that. So, get back to my screen here, and communicating effectively, I think you all are spot on with some of your responses here. And it very much is that process, right, of exchanging information, the thoughts, the emotions, and that message is then received and understood, hopefully with clarity and purpose. Emphasis on that clarity and purpose, right? Because we may be communicating and sending out those messages, but that may not necessarily guarantee that it is received and understood. And what can be helpful with that will be if there's clear messaging and if it has a purpose behind it, and if it's in a way that can then be a better chance of being received and understood by that person or those persons. So communication is a very fun topic. We could probably spend 8 hours doing a session on the many aspects of communication, but for today's purpose, we will narrow it down. And behind that, though, we do want to uplift the importance. And I know many of you know this already, but really want to hit these points home. You know, we have different issues that may come up when we're a collection of human beings and we're working together. We have certain goals, certain services that we have to provide to our community. And with that, when we communicate effectively, we are able to then work through some of these issues. And sometimes these miscommunications can be reduced, and we can hopefully work through them, find the clarity and the resolution that we need, and then move forward. Another reason why this is important is through building relationships. So again, on our teams of human beings, the connection, the trust, all that is vital to us then being able to tackle whatever service, function, goal our particular team, our particular department has been tasked to do. So again, in terms of importance, the building that connection, making that foundation for trust, communication is a very important tool in the toolbox to achieving that. Improving professional life. So this refers to us again existing on a team as a professional, but also being able to not only work with one another, but maybe even be able to grow our skill sets as professionals to then be able to maybe one day advance in our respective career on our track, be able to connect with and communicate with team members from all different perspectives and preferences. Productivity. So I know everybody knows the complexities of some of the issues that we take on, right, with our respective role in local government, our goals, our projects, many different moving parts. When we are able to communicate effectively, what we can do is we can hopefully reduce some of the missteps, some of the conversations that might not go anywhere, and we're spinning our wheels. We can instead focus on moving things forward, focus on being more productive with the time allotted that we have for our particular tasks. And then positively impacts our workplace culture. So when I say culture, I'm referring to that environment, that ecosystem that we all are actively contributing to. So when we're communicating more effectively and more intentionally, what we are doing is we are not only communicating regarding a particular task, particular project, but we are conveying to our teammates, we are conveying to even the work itself that we are taking this very serious. We are creating a positive and respectful workplace culture where the standard is that we will work together, we will try to find that common ground and tackle what it is we need to tackle in our respective team. All right, so enough of me yapping at you. Let's dive into a little activity here. Let's assess the situation. So again, if you have a pen and paper, or maybe a notes document on your computer, now is the time to have that ready to go, because what we're about to do, I'm going to present a couple of questions, and I want you to then take a moment to write out or type out your thoughts. And again, this is going to be for your eyes only. This is more of a self-reflection activity. There will be an opportunity to share out some quick thoughts of whatever you're comfortable sharing. But right now, the goal of this is to have you respond to some of these different prompts related to communication. And again, that's an interesting insight when we talk about those of us who prefer a pen and paper versus those of us who may prefer an electronic method. But let's get to the first one here. And hopefully, again, you have your note-taking method ready to go. All right, so the first question that I want you to take a moment to respond to, and again, this is for your eyes only, but the question is, when I'm at work, what are the many ways that I communicate with others? What are the many ways I communicate with others? Right? Any and all thoughts that come to your mind. Think about the many interactions and scenarios that happen in your day-to-day. Maybe you do work through a lot of emails and respond to them. Is there maybe a request attached to that, some sort of a deadline attached to that? Maybe you find yourself in many in-person meetings. Maybe you find yourself with more one-on-one type conversations. Maybe you spend a lot of time on the phone, making phone calls, or maybe even Teams or Zoom virtual calls. So take a moment and just write down on your piece of paper or on your notes document a response to what are the many ways that you communicate with others. Give you a quick 10 seconds to wrap up your thoughts, and we'll move on to the next part. And with that said, this is an opportunity to share in the chat any quick thoughts on what came to mind with some of the different ways that maybe you didn't think about at first. Go ahead and throw in the chat if once you really think about this, gosh, I'm communicating in a couple different ways. Ooh, Shannon, love that. Verbal, email, phone, non-verbal. Yep, that's very important to uplift even the, seeing somebody in the break room, in the hallway, a smile, a wave, an acknowledgement, that goes a long way. Excellent. Yep, others feel free to throw a quick thought in the chat there. Teams messaging, you hear the little ding and you see what's going on, right? Yep, how I dress, how I present myself, right? Even if you're not directly saying words to somebody, that does communicate something to the person. Excellent, love it. And feel free to keep typing, but we'll move on to the next question here. So again, have your pen and paper handy. And question 2. How well do my peers think I communicate? How well do my peers think that I communicate? Ooh, that's self-reflection. How well do my peers, my teammates, those I work alongside, how do I perceive that they think I communicate? Again, this is for your eyes only.
Oh, sorry.
Now, many of us may very well have a supervisor, so I kind of want to throw that wrinkle in there too, in terms of how well does my supervisor think I communicate with them? Giving you that little nugget to chew on. And then also for those of you who may be managers or supervisors, what about your direct reports? How do you think they would perceive you as a communicator? Give you some time to just jot down some thoughts. Again, what you're writing down is for your eyes only. If anybody wants to share out anything on the chat, feel free to, in terms of perception of how you communicate. Appreciate the honesty, the authenticity, and the vulnerability. Self-reflection can be a little intimidating sometimes, but it really does help us think through the many ways that communication is present here in our workplace.
RJ, as people are thinking about that and responding to it, there was a comment earlier on your earlier question from Lashara. She pointed out that even how we dress is a way that we communicate. And I think probably a lot of times we don't think that. That's a good one.
Excellent. Yeah, good point. Yeah, the way we dress, the way we present ourselves. If I just kind of roll out of bed and show up, that might say one thing versus maybe I took some time to get myself looking a little more put together, right? Excellent. I'm reading through the chat here, and I appreciate the self-reflections here and the honesty. Thank you, Matthew. Appreciate that. Excellent. And then just for the sake of time, we'll move on to the next one. But yeah, I appreciate all the openness there in the chat. All right, last one for this activity. Question 3. Want you all to think about someone that you perceive as a good communicator. They're a good communicator. What do they do with their behaviors, their actions, and their words? So think of somebody, it could be somebody you work with, could be somebody you have worked with, maybe in a previous work life, could be someone else. Maybe you don't directly work with them, but they are part of maybe some other social connection, maybe a faith group, maybe a teacher, somebody who you view as a good communicator. And really think about what are the behaviors and the actions that they do that give you that impression? What are the words or the language they use that give you the impression that, wow, they're a good communicator? And if you have anything shareable with that, feel free to put it in the chat. And again, what you're writing down in your notes is for your eyes only. So yes, someone's a good communicator. Great listener, concise with their words. Yeah, Bridget, that's big. Makes you feel valued. Yes, Chad. Yep. 100%. Patient, concise, not easily flustered, action-oriented. Very important, Rachel. Yeah. Excellent. Keep them coming. Hey, Marcy, clear expectations. Yeah. Yep. Deborah, quick to reply. Yep. Putting in some thought in their responses. Excellent. And keep those responses coming because, you know, as we learn from one another, and I just want to hold some space if anyone wants to put anything in the chat that they didn't have a chance to. But really, there's a lot we can learn from one another. Because yes, while we may be receiving the communication, you know, with our tasks, right? Like, hey, I got this report. It has a deadline by Friday. I need X, Y, and Z from you. A lot of those, you know, sorts of communications come up often, right, throughout the course of a day. But I also invite you all to think about, you know, your team, think about those who you perceive to be more effective communicators, whether they are supervisors or leaders, or maybe other teammates, maybe teammates who have been in the roles for a while, or maybe they're new to the team, bringing some fresh ideas and fresh energy to the team. But there's so much we can learn from one another in our respective teams regarding communication. And when we can focus some of that intentionality behind how can we play to our strengths, how can we meet people where they are, how can we try to grow our skills as a collective team to communicate, then that will really help push our ability to drive things forward in a more efficient way. So I really love what y'all are putting into the chat. I appreciate that. Yep. Understand before responding, stay focused on the issue. Excellent, reserved, calm, clear, concise. So, you know, with that said, we'll transition to the next portion. But again, given the fact that we as local government, we have a pretty interesting role here in that we provide some necessary services and functions to our entire community, to all residents of the city of Lincoln and Lancaster County. We tend to find ourselves with different challenges, different deadlines, different demands, and all that may have an impact on our ability to communicate with one another and to the public that we serve. So I just really want to stress that there's so much we can learn from one another. And when we take the time to acknowledge one another in terms of communication styles, there's a lot that we can build upon. Now, with that said, we'll move things over to the next portion and turn it over to Christy, who will then guide us in some of the many different styles and preferences and how we can move on to finding the common ground, making adjustments, and moving things forward.
All right, thanks, RJ. If you will unshare, then I'll share my screen.
Okay, let me unshare. Oops, there we go.
Okay, are you seeing my screen now?
I am.
Okay.
Perfect.
Great. So, hi everyone. I'm excited to be here with you again. The last topic from our last session and this one, these are a couple of my favorite topics. So I enjoy being able to go over this kind of information with people. Now, during our last session, you know, the topic was bridging differences. And RJ mentioned this. We introduced the 4 key styles that people have and the behaviors that we tend to see from each of those styles. Now, that was important because people bring different priorities, approaches, and responses to stress into their workplace every day, right? And understanding where we're each coming from can help us bridge differences. Now, how many of you were here for that last session? You should be able to raise your team's hand. There should be a hand that you can raise, and I'm just kind of curious how many of you were able to join us for that last session? RJ, maybe you can kind of get a gauge of that. I'm not seeing, oh, a couple hands are going up. Okay. Yeah, that's great. So we're going to revisit those styles today, and then we'll build on them because we also each bring different communication styles into the workplace. And understanding those different styles can help us be more effective communicators. So we'll get started in a minute, but first, let's think about our own communication preferences. Now, I'm going to open a poll so that you can finish this sentence. So give me a second here to launch it, and you should see the poll in front of you. So the prompt here is, if someone is telling me something important, I prefer that they what? So do you prefer that they give you the big picture in 60 seconds or less? Do you want someone to walk through all the details with you so that you know all the stuff? Do you want to know how it's going to impact other people? Do you want them to invite you to brainstorm? So what does that look like for you? And all right, so we've got a lot of people who are very interested in the details here. I see we're at 66% right now for people who, oh, now it's changing a little bit. There's a few more big picture people here too. Oh, Joseph says he is relating to a lot of that. And you know, that's true, Joseph. I also can relate to a couple of these, and it probably kind of depends on the situation, right? So go ahead and close that window. We're going to keep moving, but if you need to move it out of your way, please do that. So obviously we all have ways that we prefer to get information and ways that we dread getting information, right? For me, if I have to sit through someone telling me every detail, that completely stresses me out. Like I can just kind of feel my heart palpitating, thinking I'm not even going to be able to catch all this detail, and I just need to move on. So for me, I just want someone to hit me with the important parts, tell me what I need to know, why I need to know it, and then I can ask for more detail if I want it. And the other thing that I think about is, like, heaven forbid somebody send me an email and just dump a bunch of stuff on me. I used to work with someone who, that was kind of how she approached things. She said, I'll just give you all the stuff. You can look through it and figure out what matters to you. And for me, that's just a complete nightmare. But that's just me. You know, other people don't trust information if it's not detailed enough. So we're all different. And it's important that we recognize our own preferences because that's typically where we tend to communicate from. But if you want to communicate effectively and bridge differences with other people, it's a really smart move to adapt your style to fit theirs. And that's what we're going to focus on today. But let's do a quick review of those 4 styles. And as we go through these, I'd like you to kind of listen for clues about communication preferences that you might be hearing. Ready? All right, here we go. Now this is on page 2 of your handout. A little bit ago, I did pop a link to that handout into chat. So if you didn't have a chance to check your email, check for that link in chat and you should be able to get to the handout. But this is on page 2. We have a little bit of a review of these styles. Now, the first thing that we need to understand when we're thinking about these 4 styles are the 2 continuums of personality. So the vertical one that you're seeing here looks at how we communicate and interact with others. People at the top of the continuum are usually outgoing and assertive, while people at the bottom are more reserved and slower paced when they interact with other people. Now the horizontal column or continuum looks at what we focus on. So people on the left side of the continuum are more fact-based and task-focused, while people that are over on the right are more people-focused and they sort of think about the big picture more than the details. Then when we start to combine these 2 elements, how we interact and what we pay attention to, that's when the 4 styles start to emerge. So let's take a look at that. The first one is when we combine a focus on tasks and detail with that outgoing and assertive style at the top. And so we call this style a doer. Doers get things done. A lot of times they're just really involved with their hands in the physical world, less than kind of thinking about things. They're fast-paced and impatient, and they like results, practicality, and action. Doers are typically decisive, straightforward, and they could come across a little bit forceful. Now moving clockwise, the second style combines that same outgoing and assertive way of interacting that's at the top, but now we're looking at those who have a focus on people instead of tasks. And we call this style a communicator. So communicators get things done by building relationships. They're focused on teamwork, and usually they're very responsive, flexible, and enthusiastic. So continuing on, the third style combines people that are focused on people, right? So we've got that people focus with that more reserved and slow-paced style of interacting at the bottom. And this style is referred to as a thinker. So thinkers work with ideas and concepts. They're insightful, creative, and they tend to like theories and have an ability to connect dots that others don't necessarily see. And then the last style is a combination of that reserved and slow-paced approach at the bottom with a focus on tasks. So this style is referred to as an analytical. Analytical people work with rules and structure. They're driven by compliance and doing things right, and they care about details, facts, and process. Okay, now as I walked through the 4 styles, what clues did you pick up on about communication preferences? Let me know in chat if you heard anything there that you think, well, yeah, that's probably going to be a helpful clue when we're thinking about how people communicate. Let me know what you picked up on. I'm thinking that there's some thinking going on. Like you may have noticed, there are folks that like detail and accuracy and other folks that might not. So those are the kinds of things that we're sort of thinking about here. Thanks, Angie. Have to be very intentional with your communication with your coworkers who are analytical. Absolutely, that's a good call out. So these styles then that we've just reviewed, they lead to our natural preferences for how we like to give and receive information. But of course, we don't have style assessments for everyone that we work with, right? So what are we supposed to do here? Well, there's a lot that you can pick up on just by paying attention to what people say and do. So for example, if you pay attention to how people sound and move in conversation, you'll notice if they come across as high energy or calm and deliberate. Next, notice if they typically lead with information or emotion. Do they give you stats and data, or do they tell you how they feel about something? And then how about the third one here? Do they thrive on plans and timelines, or do they prefer flexibility and brainstorming? And then the last one, what do they focus on when they're talking? Do they talk about goals or process, or are they more about, kind of thinking outside the box and things being a little bit gray? So those are the key areas to pay attention to. But now let's think about how these elements show up in the different styles. So we're going to start with doers. And since doers like results and action, they typically want to get to the point fast when they communicate, whether it's in person or by email. So doers like the detail, but they don't have time for it. So when you're talking to someone who has this style, give a summary and bullets, and then be prepared to give them more detail if they ask for it, because they may be interested, but don't start with the detail. And then communicators are concerned with relationships and teamwork. So don't try giving people with this style long, detailed documents or instructions, because they're probably not going to read it. The best thing to do is to talk in person. And when you do, make time for a little bit of chit chat. Don't dive right into your points right away, because this style really appreciates building a warm relationship. And then stress the relationship between what you're talking about and the people that are concerned. In other words, how it might impact their customers or their coworkers or whatever the case might be. Now moving on to thinkers. Remember, thinkers like concepts and theories and innovation, and they care about harmony. So when you want to communicate with a thinker, sit down and have a one-on-one conversation. Allow time for discussion. Don't put them on the spot to make a decision fast because they're going to want to think about it. And don't be surprised if they process their thinking out loud. They might take you in circles a little bit as they think things through. So try not to get impatient with someone who has this style. And then since thinkers appreciate innovation, it could be good to emphasize the uniqueness of whatever it is you're communicating about. And by the way, communicators and thinkers might both enjoy brainstorming and coming up with new out-of-the-box ways of doing things. Then finally, analyticals care about detail and facts. They're kind of the polar opposite of communicators, right? So when you're communicating with someone who's analytical, organize your discussion in a logical order and include options with pros and cons. You could outline what you're communicating in writing and provide details and facts to this group. Okay, so you can see how different each style is and how we could really miss the mark with someone if we don't understand their communication needs. You know, imagine, let's say that there's a communicator boss asking an analytical person. Angie was just kind of talking about this, but asking an analytical person for a quick budget estimate or something like that, right? Analytical people don't do quick estimates. They like to do things thoroughly and properly, and that takes time. So that kind of a request would most likely frustrate someone with that style. So hopefully you're starting to see that communicating the way you prefer might not get you the results you want when you're working with others. When we're working in a team or with other departments, there could be a pretty big mismatch in how we work and communicate with each other. And ultimately, if we want our communication to be more effective, someone's going to have to adjust. And you might be thinking, why should I be the one to change? Why shouldn't they flex to my style? Trust me, you're not the only one thinking that. But here's what I have to say to that. Being able to flex your communication approach is a skill that will make you more successful. You can transform your interactions with other people by paying attention to their style and flexing to meet them where they're at. It makes you a more effective communicator. I want to tell you a quick story about a chief information officer that I worked with when I worked at Cabela's. So this was a lot of years ago, but we were in a leadership development program together. And one day he shared a story about how he used to tell all of his team members, if you come to me with a problem, you better be ready to give me A, B, and C, or I'm not even going to listen. He was wanting them to flex their style to match his because he knew what he needed in order to be able to process the information. But what he told us was that he finally realized that as a leader, he could be more effective with his team if he let them communicate in their way first, and then he asked questions to get the clarity that he needed. And what he found was that being more flexible and respecting their needs actually helped him build trust with his team members. So that's a story that I've always remembered because it just seems important, and it kind of shows us that it goes both ways when we're flexing, right? We need to flex when we're delivering information, but we may also need to flex how we want to receive information so that we can work effectively with others. So I want to show you a couple of resources that can help you flex your style. And this first one is on page 4 of your handout. It's titled Recognizing Communication Styles. So first, what I want to do is just explain what you see on that page. The 4 styles that we just went through are listed down the left-hand side of the page. And then the 2 middle columns give you some ideas of what you might hear someone with that style talk about. Now that what you're seeing on my slide is just the doer section. So I'm focusing on doer here, but of course you have all the styles on that handout. So here, if you're working with someone who talks about results or goals and objectives, or they're interested in getting to a decision so they can take action, chances are you're probably talking to a doer. Now, if you'll shift your eyes, so on that worksheet, shift your eyes to the far right column. That gives you clues about what you might see from someone who is a doer or who is any of those styles. So doers are direct. They might appear impatient. They want action fast. They're down to earth. They don't have time for drama. So again, this is the doer, but you can see the same type of information for the other styles on that handout. Now, here's what I'd like you to do. Think about one person that you work with regularly that you think has a different style than you. You know, maybe when you're communicating with them, either way, when you're listening or sharing, communicating maybe feels kind of hard with them. So have that person in mind and take about 15 seconds looking at that page to figure out where you think they might show up on this table based on what you've heard and seen from them. We'll give you about 15 seconds. Okay. Now, if you'll turn the page, I believe this is on page 6. I hope I have that right. Actually, I've got the handout here in front of me. This is actually pages 5 and 6, sorry. So we're going to look at ways that you can adjust to other communication styles. So there's just some tips here. And I'm focusing on the doer again with this screenshot. So these are just a few tips that can help you when you're communicating with a doer. On one of the slides that you have in your handout, there are a few other things that you can take a look at where we were looking at the communication styles. So some ideas are make sure that you start meetings on time, get to the point quickly when you're talking with a doer and let them know up front, what is the purpose of the conversation? Don't take them, you know, in circles before they know, why am I here? You'll notice too that on this document, there are tips for flexing your email communication, which can be really valuable. So now let's take a look at the communicator section because I want to do just a little bit of a comparison here. So communicating with this style is, of course, quite different from communicating with a doer, where the doer wants to get right to the point. A communicator appreciates starting off with a little bit of small talk, and they may even want to hear stories or examples that illustrate your point, whereas a doer would be unlikely to want that. Now, it's a good idea to start off with a warm greeting when you're either meeting with a communicator or when you're emailing a communicator. This is something that this really stood out to me with one of my coworkers who she received an email that didn't have a greeting. It was just like a very short email, very direct. It just dove right into the point, and she was very offended by it. To her, when she read it, it just felt demanding and rude. And you know, I read it and I didn't have the same reaction, but it's just that was the difference between our styles. And she's a communicator. My guess is that the email was probably from a doer. So, you know, a lot of times I think we kind of forget that email communication can be just as important as face-to-face communication, and we can have disconnects there too. So we have to focus on how we position our emails just as much as how we communicate orally. So let's take a look at how email communications might differ between these two styles. So we'll look at a couple of examples, and let's just say that a manager has to send an email to ask for a project status update. Okay, so that's what we're going to be looking at here. Now, if the manager is a doer, here's what their email might look like. Okay, so raise your hand if you've received an email like this before, or maybe you send emails like this. Or you can let us know in chat. We have a few hands going up. Oh yeah, see a lot of hands going up. Yeah, and this is probably a normal email for a doer, right? Now, here's what the same thing might sound like from a communicator. Does that look familiar? I'm sure we've all either seen or sent emails like this too, right? Now, if you're on the receiving end of these two messages, okay, so imagine yourself on the receiving end, which one would you prefer to get? Just tell me one or two in chat. Do you prefer number one? Do you prefer number two? I've got a lot of twos coming up. My chat's trying to catch up with all the responses. So I'm not seeing them. Oh, okay. Well, we've got a mix here. Can you report back, RJ? What are you seeing?
Seeing lots of twos. Yeah, fair number of ones.
Okay.
Probably say majority twos.
Some say both. Lace says a mix. Yeah. Well, so neither one is right or wrong, but you can see a definite difference in the appropriate audience for each one, right? And adjusting our tone and level of detail, even when it's in an email, can help us be more effective communicators. Okay, so I have one more chat question, but before you answer this, I'd like you to take 30 seconds to just look over the rest of that adjusting to other communication styles pages. So that was pages 5 and 6. So take 30 seconds. And what I'd like you to do is highlight one of the tips there that you think could be a game changer for you when you're communicating with others. So take a look at it, highlight, and then enter something in chat. Let me know what was the thing that caught your attention on that list that you think you'll try. Okay, paraphrase and confirm. It's a good one. I feel like that's good all the time. Warm, upbeat tones and emails. David, I think that can definitely be a game changer. And for me, what I've really noticed is that my first draft of an email is not warm or upbeat. It is to the point. I just try and get the information down, and then I usually look back at it and I'm like, oh, I better add a little bit of friendliness into that. Okay, Holly, allowing for small talk, avoiding abrupt or demanding tones. Yeah, these are some good ones. I'm glad that you're finding a tip here that you think will help. Okay, well, please go ahead and feel free to keep entering your game changers in chat. But that's it for me, and I'm going to turn it back over to RJ now. I'll stop sharing so that you can take over.
Wonderful. Thank you, Christy. You know, that's always insightful, just navigating those different preferences, those different styles, and then to be able to be a little more intentional with like shifting, making those adjustments and finding the success with that, I think is big. I mean, in terms of, at least in my experience, you can tell when something lands and something doesn't land in the way that I would have liked. So really made me think with that section. I really appreciate hearing that. All right, so let's dive into the next portion here to round out the hour. This will build upon some of the things that Christy started to show as well. We talk about communication techniques, and again, this will be on the handout on page 7 as well. But I want to talk through a couple of these because hopefully we can take these and practice and feel comfortable with them, and then think about in our respective workplaces and in the different interactions and scenarios that we might find ourselves in during a given workday. Hopefully we can think about ways to incorporate these where it makes sense and where is appropriate. First one is active listening. And again, many of us are familiar with this, but just really want to drive this home. It's the listening to understand. Okay, it's not countering, it's not, well, but, it's listening to understand and being able to demonstrate that with some of that positive and welcoming, inviting body language, whether it be, even a simple smile on your face, a nod of your head there, just to show that you're following along. Sometimes some of us may take a little while to kind of unfold what it is we need to try to communicate, especially if it's something time sensitive, maybe there's a stressor involved. So again, just being able to practice and be intentional with holding space for actively listening can be a major value here in the workplace. Structured turn taking. So when we have multiple people that we're maybe in a meeting with, maybe we all have ideas, it's a brainstorm session, etc. There's different ways that we can try to be a little more structured, and in doing so, that will help hold space and invite the input from some of those thinkers, some of those communicators who might just kind of need a little moment to kind of see the big impact on things before contributing their ideas. So it could be something like a verbal handoff. Could be, well, I'll pause here. What do you think, Christy? And then she would respond. Or maybe especially I see this in Zoom and Teams meetings often where folks will want to dive in and respond at the same time. But even something like, you'll say what you say, and that's my update, handing it over to you, and so on. And keeping those thoughts concise. I know we touched on this already, but just maybe sharing out the 1 to 2 key points and then pausing to allow others to respond to that. What we don't want to do is try to end up with a monologue where somebody, just keeps talking and others aren't allowed or given space to contribute. The next point here that we'll talk about is paraphrasing and confirming or restating, also known as like the repeat back, right? So this is where you would say something like, if I'm understanding you correctly, what you're saying is X, Y, and Z. Is that accurate? And in doing so, it can be helpful for others to hear back what they've said and see if in fact that is what they wanted to convey, or what, maybe it didn't come out the way I had hoped, so actually it's something else. So just taking a moment to repeat back what somebody is saying can be a way to kind of slow things down, make sure the messages are getting communicated, and then, break away for whatever action or response you're needing to work on. Clarifying questions or defaulting to curiosity. Somebody may approach you with some sort of an ask or maybe a big idea, and instead of closing the door right away and saying, oh, that'll never work, or oh, this is so overwhelming, it's asking clarifying questions. It's that curiosity, approaching it with curiosity, and say something like, well, your point about what you were just saying, tell me more about that. And in doing that, you invite someone to kind of unpack a little further what they're saying, but it also helps them sometimes communicate and connect what it is exactly they want you to know if it didn't get communicated right away. And last, offer multiple ways to contribute. So again, this isn't just putting somebody on the spot and saying, well, what do you think about this? In particular during team meetings and other instances where maybe it could be either intimidating or again, for some of the more thoughtful and analytical folks, they might need a moment to kind of connect the dots before responding. Offer multiple ways to contribute those inputs. It could be verbal, written, could be visual channels, utilize the technology we have, whether it is a follow-up email, follow-up in-person conversation, or maybe like a Teams message if you're waiting on their input. And an established window of time is helpful. Hey, this input's time sensitive. Can you please let me know before end of day, 2 days from now? But being clear with those windows of time. And one approach that's helpful is the think, write, share approach instead of the think, speak. So you give you might be in a team meeting, a group setting, and you give people 1 to 2 minutes to think, and then they jot down their thoughts and ideas, and then you would invite volunteers to share out any of their contributions. Could be, for the entire group. If it's a big sort of group, maybe it's small groups. But the takeaway there is that there's different ways we can structure things to try to invite some of that input from different teammates. And again, this will lend itself to some of the different styles. Any of you out there have any other ideas for inclusive communication techniques, please jot them down. I'm always happy to update the list with other ideas. Put them in the chat there or follow up with me. I'm happy to see how we can spread the message of just inviting different ways of getting feedback and input from all teammates here at the city and the county. And with that said, we're coming up on time here. That handout is yours, so please take that with you and keep it somewhere where you can reflect on it. Also on the intranet, there will be the recording of this session if you want to revisit any of the topics we touched upon, or you can reach out to either myself or Christy. Quick plug for the upcoming Lunch and Learns. It's weird to say we're already going to be in 2026, but January 14th, the Leave Benefits 101 session, and then February 11th is Making Sense of Medicare. So again, that can be found on the training calendar through the intranet on the HR page under the Learning tab there. And then the next Elevate Your Impact for this next quarter will be in March 5th. It's Building and Maintaining a Culture of Accountability. And there's a lot that we have in mind for that topic. So hopefully you can join us for the next Elevate Your Impact session. And then last but not least, there is a feedback survey, and you can either grab your smartphone and take a picture of that QR code and it'll take you to the survey. The survey is anonymous, and we appreciate and value all your feedback as we continue to build upon these online Lunch and Learn resources that are open to all employees of the city and the county. And I'll pause there. Christy, anything you want to add or anything I didn't mention?
Yes, I do want to add something. Thank you. I want to give a shameless plug for another series that will be starting next year. It is coming out from One Lincoln, which is a group within the city that focuses on creating a more inclusive and welcoming workplace. And so they are working on a series called One Lincoln Voices that will spotlight community partners and cultural traditions that make our community vibrant. So we're super excited about that. We're looking forward to what that group brings to us. That will go on our calendar, the training calendar that's on the intranet, as soon as we have the dates nailed down, and then you'll be able to register for those Lunch and Learns as well. So I think they're going to be some really great stuff this year.
Great reminder. Thank you, Christy. Very excited for the One Lincoln series that'll be happening. And then also want to make a quick plug. I see Bridget's comment. Shout out to GARE 3.0 and to the other 2 cohorts. The next GARE training application window will likely happen here in the middle of December. Stay tuned. We'll finalize a couple details and we'll work with directors and agency heads on that. But just stay tuned. If you know anybody or if you yourself are interested in the GARE training program, the application window will be happening later this month. Awesome. And with that hour flew by. Really appreciate y'all joining us for Elevate Your Impact. And yeah, look forward to seeing you next time.
Bye. Thanks, everyone.